whenever we mention the word kemet, there's always someone who comes in to mention that the word chem meant the land, the color of the land, instead of people, and okuma, or whatever the word really is. And then they say that the word desher means red, in contrast to this chem, which desher, which comes from the word desheret, desert.
Divided our territory into two parts, or Tawi, Upper and Lower Egypt, distinguishing between the dark, fertile land called Kemet and the dry desert landscape called Deshret. The red color of the desert, or Deshret, represented Seth, god of evil, disease, chaos, and death. And the green and black of Kemet represented Osiris, god of regeneration and continuous rebirth. Now let's shed some light on Kemet's meaning. Kemet, the official name of our country, is considered the beloved land, or Tamiri, gift of the Nile Valley. The word Kemet consists of two parts, the Kem and the T. The symbol Kem represented black earth or fertile soil. The symbol T represents place or land. Kemet is better understood as the land of the black fertile soil, or the black land, representing the yearly flood that enriched our soil and gave us the nutrient-rich land on which all of our agriculture and civilization is based on. Now, Deshret is the opposite of Kemet. The term Deshret, which is actually the great-grandfather of the English word desert, represented the red-hot dry lands of the desert of Egypt. It symbolizes the harsh, inhospitable environment beyond the Nile Valley and serves as a contrast to the agricultural abundance of Kemet. These two terms, Kemet and Deshret, symbolize the dualistic nature of Egyptian land. These two terms highlight the significance of the Nile River to the Egyptian people. So in simple terms, we named our country Kemet after the very essence of our lives and prosperity. Dark, rich soil that gave us our agriculture, on which we base our entire civilization. Now, we heard about the modern misinterpretation of the word Kemet.
Means red. But if you look at the land of Egypt, the desert is not red, it's brown. So what's going on here? It's actually more simple than you think. In ancient Egypt, like a lot of cultures around the world, a color wasn't necessarily specific. And so the word red in ancient Egypt could mean red, but it could also mean brown, and in some cases yellow. But obviously, in the case of the desert, they meant brown, not red. And I don't know why no one ever brings this up when they mention it. They always bring it up as like a debunking, saying, hey, if the people who lived in Kemet are Kemi, which means black, then that means the people living in the Deshret have to be red. Actually, they'd have to be brown, because that's the color that's being invoked here, not red. Don't get me wrong, this does not mean that the word red does not mean Desher. It actually does. As you can see with Mentuhotep's hat or crown, his crown would be considered Desher, but his skin would also be considered the color Desher. This is based on labeling, and this is based on typical color, and therefore a color that we would expect the ancient Egyptians to call themselves would be Desher, not Kuma or Kemet. None of that. We would expect them to call themselves Desher more, because they portrayed themselves as if they were dark skinned. In very exceptional cases, we would expect them to call themselves Kemites, in the sense that they are black, because that would be what foreigners would call them. And as you see, foreigners do call them that. Like when the Greeks say they're swarthy, like when I showed you the Minoans painted them as pitch black, and so did the Middle Easterners of various kinds, different kinds, not just one type, from the Iranians to all of them, basically. I don't even want to go through all of them right now. And if you take Israelites seriously in the Bible, they don't exactly paint a picture of these light skinned Egyptians. Now, needless to say, I have to emphasize this over and over again. The skin color of the ancient Egyptians is not the best evidence that we have. It's a very good one to prove it. And I'll start with the highest point of the color thing. First of all, let's start with the fact that sometimes the ancient Egyptians did paint themselves with the color black. Secondly, the fact that they always paint men with dark brown, yellow, except if it's in a religious symbolism, which, by the way, people always tell me that they do this. Like in religious symbolism, they always paint it as yellow, but I've seen the same gods, which are sometimes painted as yellow, painted with brown as well. These are religious symbols, sometimes painted with brown. Thirdly, let's go down to one thing. Let's just get one thing straight. In terms of the literature, before we move on, let's get one thing straight. The word desher is the word that I expect to be used the most, since the color that you can see in the color chart, that it resembles variants that seem to resemble the skin colors of the ancient Egyptians in their varieties. So that's the word I expect to be used more than ever. I feel like looking for the word chem or chemi is a wild goose chase, and you're going to find yourself unstuck. And again, this dark skinned color could represent chem, because as you can see in the color chart, the word chem just means really dark colors like gray, black, and so on. You know, those shades that are overpowered, OP. And if you look around, you'll notice that the again, the deshret, the desert, which for some reason, I don't know why Egyptologists keep insisting that the color of the desert is red. But if you open up your eyes, you will see that the parts that are of the desert that are red are almost non-existent. The whole thing is almost always brown. The whole desert is covered with brown. And if the color of the area with water in it is black because of the inundation, as Herodotus carefully states in his book, in which, you know, these creepers try to say that is a made up fact. Like Herodotus never got to Egypt. Okay, so how did he know so much information? How did he separate the fact that the part by the ocean is so black? By the way, you know the later Roman passages that they use, and they say this guy actually went to Egypt. You know that most of those people were working from his texts. That's just me going off in another direction. But let's start off simple here in one direction. The word desher means brown. The colors, desher colors, are mainly used to color in the ancient Egyptians. The modern Egyptians are heterogeneous today. But if you expect a population that is unchanging for 4,000 years, 6,000 in my estimation, but 4,000 years, as they say, of the entire period of the ancient Egyptians, then you have to provide evidence that they are homogeneous being. Like Zahi Hawass says, they are unique to everybody else. Well, if they're unique, then they must be homogeneous. They can't have wide diversity. That does not happen, not to a unique people. Secondly, the ancient Egyptian pharaohs practiced incest, so you should not expect that much diversity in the elites, considering that they wanted elites made children with other elites, and eventually they were all generally related. And the only influx, or well, there's two influxes of outsider DNA coming in. One is the kings of or the queens of other kingdoms who would be given as offerings, and then secondly would be military takeovers from other clans and other people who throw in their genetics in there and it gets mixed up. And these periods are called intermediate periods. But it does seem like more than once the link or the chain of ancient Egyptian family was broken a couple times. The funny part is, with this, we've already proven that the haplogroups of Ramses II and Tutankhamun aren't necessarily directly linked all the way to the core, which shows that there must have been a break a couple times. And if you know the history of Ramses and if you know the history of Tutankhamun, you'll know that there definitely was a break in those two at least, and it happened a couple times actually. As you can see with the video that I put, the picture that I put on the screen, red desher made of oxidized red and iron and red ochre used to create flesh tones and symbolize life, but also evil and destruction. Red was associated with both fire and blood and so symbolized vitality and energy, but could also be used to accentuate a certain danger or define destructive deity. Now, for those who are perceptive out there, you'll remember how I told you how in Bantu culture, let's take the Zulus for example, colors would resemble a negative symbol and sometimes a positive symbol. And I can play that video to illustrate this, but I think I don't have to, but I might. But let's first look at something.
Amazing, the wonders of modern technology. So, Kengi, just looking at this image here, what would this necklace tell us about, what would the sequence of colors and patterns tell us about the wearer of this necklace?
Okay, first you look at the way that they put the colors together, and then looking at the color of the necklace, which has got the green as an edge, and the color of the necklace, that green, it's a light green, it's representing that I am young. So this necklace, it's belonged to an engaged woman.
Sorry, so this is the green around the neck?
Yes, that green, it's a light green that says, I'm not young enough not to be chosen. So it means, as I said to you, I love you. So it means that I am ready to become your wife.
Wow, fishy.
And then they've added the pink, which pink in Zulu, they call it isipofu, which refer to poor. So it means, in this case, I'm not looking at the wealthy. I'm not looking at what at your father's kraal, how many kekels you have, but I'm just coming with pure love. I love you, even if I know that you've got nothing, with the hope that one day you'll be able to marry me. That's why they put that black, which is representing the leather skirt that is worn by married women.
So she's marrying for love?
Yes, like she's wishing to get married, and then she's had a hope that the wife, the boyfriend, would be able to pay the price of the bride. And then you look at the panel, the extra two panel, which is amatema, and it's got rows like lines. It shows these are the walking the path that they'll be taking in their relationship. And then it's had the green, which is a little bit darker to the green that is on the neck collar, the darker one. That green, it's a symbol of waiting. Like if you see, like looking at the river, and then there were always like stones on the side of the river, because the water bumps on those stones all the time, they become greenish. So that shows that those stones has been there for quite a long time. So this lady, it doesn't matter how long it should take to put together the price of the bride, but she'll wait because she's got the love. That's why they add that red as a love.
Beautiful.
For those of you who missed it, as you can see with some of these color symbols, the word pofu, which means pink or light red, could mean being young, but it could also mean being poor. This dual symbolism that you find all over Africa, including Egypt, where they use color as a language in itself, where the symbolism is translated to people in a way where you can basically read what someone is saying just by interpreting the symbol depending on how it's portrayed. And this is true in Nigeria, this is true in West Africa, East Africa, Egypt, South Africa with the Zulu. You can see the Maasai, all kinds of people have this within the African continent. But I will even go one step further than this. The word red, which symbolizes brown in ancient Egyptian, is the same in African languages. The word red in Zulu, as you can see with this woman, how she explained it, there's two words. Let's start with the one she used, bofu, which is like pink or light red. That word can also be describing a light-skinned black person from South Africa, meaning that the word red in this case is just dependent on who they're using it on. When they use it on a human, it's just describing a light-skinned human being, a light-skinned black person. Let's move on to the other word, which is bovu, which is a Proto-Bantu word, which means red. But this word doesn't just mean red. For example, look at this dog. This dog is brown, but they would call this dog bovu in Zulu and other Bantu languages. And they would call it this because the word red in African languages is the same as the word brown, because brown is seen as a different shade of red. Just like pink is seen as a different shade of red. These words obviously have their own words locally and their own word for the word brown, but the word red is interchangeable with the word brown in all African major language groups, from Afroasiatic, as you can see with the Asian ones, to West African languages, to Bantu languages. This is not consistently true all over the world, even though other countries, it does happen that certain colors are mixed together. But I'll give one example. Aka means red in Japanese, and the word brown is not aka in Japanese for the word red. But if we come back to Africa, we notice that, again, like I said, symbolism. This connection is never made between Africa and Egypt, that symbolism is a typical trait in ancient Egypt and other countries in Africa. It not only is it a typical trait, as I showed you with this video that I just showed you, it's well established in many, many, many areas of Africa. And one more example, the word Xaza could mean green and it could also mean blue in Zulu. And you can notice over there that the ancient Egyptian word for blue and the ancient Egyptian word for green can also be interchangeable. This is probably due to a interpretation that blue is just a variation or variety of green. Green is a variety of blue and blue is a variety of green. This does not mean that they cannot see the color blue or they cannot see the color green as different. They actually can. They have words that are different, that show that they're different. But when they generalize colors into their basic forms, just like when we do primary colors. For example, if you look at the color orange, like if you had to place it somewhere, are you placing it closer to yellow or are you placing it closer to red? Depending on what culture you come from, you're going to place it on one side or the other. And some people would say it's red, some people say it's orange. That's good. If you look at the color gray, is it more white or is it more black to you? Depending on how it is, right? It depends on the shade of gray. And in some instances, some people will even make black not a color in their culture, but instead be the absence of color. But in some cases, it not only is it a color, it's a color of multiple varieties, depending on which culture you ask. So, as you can see with what I'm saying, color in Africa is deep. And it's not only deep, it's symbolic. It's used as a symbol. Now, am I saying that symbolism in color has never been used outside of Africa? No, that's not what I'm saying. But this consistency of color, this duality of symbolism, where it could mean something positive, it could mean something negative, this is unique within this culture,
on which we base our entire civilization. Now, we heard about the modern misinterpretation of the word kemet as land of the blacks. And the funniest thing actually, it seems like the group that is misinterpreting kemet as land of the blacks is completely ignoring and hiding the word deshret, even though they were always written together and seen together in all of our texts and scripts. Well, since kemet means land of the blacks, deshret means land of the reds.
Given everything I've said, this should sound very hilarious to you at this moment. The fact that she is saying they're red, when in real life, the ancient Egyptians literally referred to themselves as Desher. They painted themselves as Desher, and they were considering themselves as red. But the pure version of red, not Desher, meaning chaos, which is only one interpretation of that word. Desher, meaning chaos, refers to the desert because the desert can be harsh.
Greenland means land of the greens, and Iceland means land of the ice people, and Narnia is real. To even